The afternoon sun draped its golden light over the Silver Pines Country Club, painting long, lazy shadows across the manicured lawns. Gerald walked slowly along the familiar paths, feeling the slight unevenness of the stone beneath his feet. His silver hair glimmered softly in the sunlight, and his eyes, calm yet observant, scanned the trees and the quiet lakes surrounding the club. This place had been a sanctuary for him for over 2 decades, a haven of peace, laughter, and gentle routine. But today, Gerald felt a strange tension in the air, as if the world around him had subtly shifted. A new group of members had arrived in recent months, young, wealthy, and brimming with confidence. Unlike the regular members who greeted him with nods and smiles, these newcomers barely acknowledged his presence. Their laughter, loud and sharp, seemed to echo in the hallways, highlighting the contrast between their energy and his quiet composure. By late afternoon, Gerald was summoned to the boardroom. He walked in slowly, each step deliberate, feeling the weight of decades behind him. The room was cold, formal, and impersonal, the kind of space that emphasized decisions rather than empathy. The words that followed were like an invisible hand pushing him from the life he had known. "Your membership is no longer required. We feel that the club is moving in a different direction, and it's best for you to step aside." A lump formed in Gerald's throat. He nodded politely, masking the storm brewing inside him. The quiet mornings, the calm walks, the gentle conversations, they were all gone in a single sentence. He left the club with a slow, measured pace, the sun casting a long shadow behind him, the sound of his footsteps echoing softly against the stones. That evening, Gerald sat alone in his study. The room was warm, filled with the gentle scent of old books and polished wood. A fire flickered in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Gerald held a cup of tea in his hands, the heat seeping into his palms. For a moment, he simply breathed, letting the world outside fade. Then, as he stared into the flames, a quiet thought formed. Perhaps they think they've won. Perhaps they believe I am powerless, but perhaps they've underestimated me. Determination, quiet yet strong, began to replace his initial hurt. Gerald began to think not of revenge and anger, but of action and patience. He remembered every corner of the club, the library where he had spent peaceful afternoons, the golf course where each morning felt like a gentle ritual, the small cafe where laughter and conversation had filled the air. Every memory was a piece of the life he cherished. The next morning, Gerald started quietly, deliberately. He walked to the local library, notebook in hand, and began a new routine. Each page he filled was a careful plan, an idea, a number, a strategy. He researched real estate, investments, and property management. Some nights he stayed awake long after the household had gone silent, studying market trends and understanding opportunities that others overlooked. Weeks turned into months, and Gerald's quiet dedication began to bear fruit. Small investments made strategically started growing steadily. No one noticed at first. The work was so understated, so methodical. His neighbors continued their routines, unaware of the subtle empire being built by the man they had always considered gentle, quiet, and unassuming. And yet Gerald never rushed. He had learned over decades that patience was more valuable than speed, and precision more valuable than passion alone. Each decision, each small step was deliberate, measured, and focused on a single goal, to reclaim his place, but not merely for status, for dignity, respect, and balance. As winter approached, Gerald's plans were taking shape. The investments had grown quietly, enough to allow him a voice, a presence, a power he had never imagined in those first humiliating moments. He could have acted in anger, sought immediate revenge, but Gerald wanted more than a fleeting victory. He wanted a transformation, a change that would last, that would teach lessons without cruelty, that would restore not only his standing, but also the sense of justice and fairness the club had lost. One crisp morning, with frost still lingering on the edges of the grass, Gerald picked up the phone and called the club's board. His voice, calm and steady, carried no hint of resentment. He said, "I am ready to become a member again, but this time on my own terms." The silence on the other end was palpable. The people who had dismissed him, who had laughed behind his back, suddenly realized they were not dealing with the same man. Gerald's tone held a quiet authority, a calm confidence that could not be ignored. The journey to this point had been long. It had required patience, research, reflection, and quiet determination. Gerald knew that the true measure of his success would not be how quickly he could reclaim his place, but how wisely and effectively he could transform the situation. As he hung up the phone, he felt a gentle satisfaction. He didn't rush to the club that day. He didn't need to show off or boast. The seeds he had planted, quietly, carefully, were ready to bloom. And when the day came to step through those gates again, it would not be as the man who had been humiliated, but as someone who had patiently, thoughtfully, and brilliantly rewritten the rules. Winter had passed, leaving behind a landscape dusted in soft white snow. Gerald's small victories and investments had quietly accumulated, creating a foundation strong enough to support his next step. Every morning he walked through the frosty streets with a sense of calm determination. There was no rush, no anger, just the slow, steady rhythm of patience and purpose. He began spending more time reviewing property records and club regulations, learning every detail that could be leveraged in his favor. He discovered the subtle weaknesses in the club's finances, the opportunities hidden in neglected assets, and the potential for transformation that no one else seemed to notice. Gerald's notebook, once filled with simple ideas, now overflowed with calculations, strategies, and thoughtful reflections. At the same time, he never stopped reflecting on the lessons life had quietly taught him. He remembered the faces of those who had dismissed him, the whispered jokes and the sharp words of rejection. But he also remembered the calm smiles of old friends, the warmth of shared moments, and the quiet dignity of living life with patience. In these memories, Gerald found his guiding principle. True power was not in retaliation, but in transformation. Spring approached slowly, and with it, Gerald's plan began to take its next shape. He quietly acquired shares in properties connected to the club, strategically building influence without drawing attention. He met with local advisors, not to flaunt wealth or seek immediate validation, but to ensure every step he took was measured and enduring. One late afternoon, as he sipped tea by his window, Gerald allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He thought about the irony of life, how rejection, humiliation, and dismissal had sparked a journey of growth and learning that might never have begun otherwise. He smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement of the resilience life demanded and the rewards patience could bring. And then the day arrived. Gerald was ready to act. He walked into the board office once more, not as the quietly dismissed member of the past, but as someone who now held both vision and influence. He requested a meeting with the board, his steps confident yet gentle, his demeanor calm and authoritative. Inside the room, the reactions were subtle at first. Some faces were pale, uncertain, as if they sensed the shift in power before understanding it.
Gerald began to speak, not with anger, but with clarity. "I have invested quietly over the past year," he began. "I now hold sufficient shares to participate meaningfully in the governance of this club. I would like to discuss how we can transform Silver Pines into a place that honors all its members, regardless of age or background." The room was silent. A tension hung in the air, the kind that comes not from fear, but from sudden realization. Those who had once dismissed him as irrelevant now saw a different figure standing before them, someone calm, deliberate, and powerful in ways they had not anticipated. Questions followed, but Gerald answered with patience, his voice steady, guiding the conversation toward possibilities rather than conflicts. He spoke of renewal, of creating spaces for elders, for quiet reflection, for nurturing community. He emphasized respect, dignity, and inclusiveness, painting a vision that was both practical and inspiring. By the end of the meeting, it became clear that Gerald was no longer simply a member seeking recognition. He was a leader, someone who had quietly but surely built influence, insight, and power. And in that realization, the board had no choice but to acknowledge his new role. Word spread slowly but unmistakably. Gerald had reclaimed his place, not through confrontation, but through preparation, patience, and quiet strategy. Members who had mocked him, underestimated him, or ignored him now were faced with a new reality. The man they had dismissed now guided the future of the club. And Gerald did not take this power lightly. He walked through the club, observing the spaces with thoughtful attention. He noticed areas neglected by management, opportunities to create new programs, and ways to foster community that were previously overlooked. Each decision was deliberate, informed by both experience and wisdom. Even those who had once scorned him could not help but notice the subtle changes. Quiet spaces for reading and reflection appeared, small gardens were tended with care, and events that celebrated creativity, knowledge, and shared experiences began to flourish. Gerald's vision transformed the atmosphere of Silver Pines, making it a place where dignity and patience were valued as much as wealth or status. And as he walked home each evening, Gerald reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The humiliation, the dismissal, and the quiet planning all had been part of a larger path. He understood that true victory was not in revenge, but in transformation, transforming oneself, transforming circumstances, and quietly inspiring respect through action rather than words. That night, as the moonlight spilled across his study, Gerald wrote in his journal, "Patience is not waiting. Patience is preparation. True strength is quiet, persistent, and guided by wisdom." And with that thought, he placed his pen down, sipping the final warmth of his tea, ready to drift into sleep with the satisfaction of a journey that was hard-earned, deliberate, and deeply fulfilling. The morning sun rose gently over Silver Pines, casting long, soft shadows across the freshly groomed lawns. Gerald walked through the familiar gates once again, but this time the sensation was entirely different. There was no tension, no humiliation, only calm anticipation. He moved slowly, observing the world around him, feeling the soft crunch of grass under his shoes, the crisp scent of early spring in the air. The club, which had once felt like a place of exclusion, now carried a subtle energy of possibility. His presence was no longer questioned. Board members greeted him with a newfound respect, and even those who had once mocked him or dismissed him now saw a different Gerald, one who carried quiet strength and thoughtful authority. The day of the official ownership announcement had arrived. The club had gathered in the main hall, a room that had once been the setting of Gerald's humiliation. Now it was filled with anticipation, curiosity, and a hint of awe. Gerald stood calmly at the front, his posture straight but relaxed, his eyes reflecting both warmth and quiet authority.
Without anger, without any hint of revenge, Gerald addressed the room. Today, I am not here to reclaim a place out of resentment. I am here to ensure Silver Pines becomes a place of respect, dignity, and opportunity for all its members. I have invested carefully, prepared diligently, and now I am entrusted with guiding this club forward. A hush fell over the room. The realization settled quietly among the members. The man they had dismissed as irrelevant, outdated, or powerless was now in a position of genuine influence. His patience, his wisdom, and his persistent effort had created a transformation that no one could deny. The formalities were brief, the papers signed, and the title officially changed hands. Gerald now held the authority to guide the club, to make decisions, and to create a space that reflected his values, wisdom, respect, and inclusivity. Yet, even as he assumed this new role, he moved with the same gentle composure that had defined him all along. There was no arrogance in his step, no need to prove himself through words or force. His actions, deliberate and thoughtful, spoke louder than any declaration could. Within days, subtle changes began to unfold. Quiet lounges were established where older members could read, relax, and reflect. Walking paths were improved, gardens nurtured, and community events that celebrated creativity, knowledge, and shared experiences. Gerald encouraged mentorship programs where experienced members could guide younger members, fostering mutual respect and learning. The impact was immediate, yet gentle. Elders who had once felt overlooked or dismissed now had spaces where their presence was honored. Younger members began to appreciate wisdom alongside energy, patience alongside ambition. The atmosphere of the club shifted from a place of status and exclusivity to a community of shared respect and gentle encouragement. Gerald's leadership style was subtle yet transformative. He avoided harsh directives, choosing instead to inspire through example. Each decision was carefully considered, reflecting both practicality and empathy. The club's operations became more efficient, more welcoming, and more inclusive. Yet, above all, Gerald's approach reminded everyone that true influence was rooted in patience, persistence, and thoughtful action. Even those who had once ridiculed him began to recognize the quiet power of his approach. They observed how he moved through challenges with calm determination, how he guided discussions without aggression, and how he allowed others to feel valued while implementing his vision. Gerald's presence was a gentle, constant reminder that true strength does not demand attention, it earns it through consistent wisdom and integrity. As weeks passed, Gerald took time each day to personally observe the spaces he had helped transform. He listened to members' feedback, encouraged new ideas, and celebrated small successes. Every smile, every acknowledgement of respect was a quiet victory, a reaffirmation that patience and preparation often yield results far beyond immediate expectation. One afternoon, as Gerald walked along a newly tended garden path, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The humiliation, the dismissal, and the quiet months of preparation had all been necessary steps.
Each challenge, each moment of doubt had been transformed into an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to create a space that reflected his values. He paused to watch the sunlight glint off the water in the nearby pond. The reflections danced gently, serene and ever-changing. Gerald smiled softly. He understood now that the true measure of success was not in wealth, power, or recognition, but in the quiet, deliberate shaping of life into something meaningful, inclusive, and enduring. That evening, Gerald wrote in his journal again, his handwriting steady, deliberate, and reflective. Humiliation teaches patience. Rejection teaches strategy. Persistence teaches strength. And above all, life teaches that quiet, thoughtful action creates the most lasting victories. He closed the journal gently, placing it beside a warm cup of tea. The fire flickered softly, the room bathed in a gentle glow. Gerald settled into his chair, feeling a calm satisfaction, a deep understanding of life's rhythms, and the quiet joy of knowing that even the most painful setbacks can be transformed into enduring triumphs. And as he drifted toward sleep, the world outside remained calm, serene, and full of gentle possibility, just as Gerald had always envisioned. The journey had been long, the lessons profound, but the victory was quiet, lasting, and deeply satisfying. Days turned into weeks, and the transformation of Silver Pines Country Club continued with quiet consistency. Gerald had established programs specifically for elder members, gentle morning walks, book clubs, creative workshops, and storytelling afternoons. These initiatives allowed older members to feel valued, respected, and included. It was no longer a place of status or wealth alone. It had become a sanctuary of shared wisdom and community spirit. Gerald watched these changes unfold with a calm satisfaction. He noticed Mrs. Langley, an elder who had always been hesitant to attend events, now teaching younger members about gardening and nature. He saw Mr. Harris, who rarely spoke in public, lead discussions in the library with quiet authority. The club, once dominated by arrogance and impatience, had become a space where patience, experience, and wisdom were honored. The younger members, initially dismissive of Gerald's approach, began to understand the depth of his leadership. They observed the way he moved through challenges with calm determination, how he encouraged collaboration rather than competition, and how he celebrated small victories as earnestly as large ones. Slowly, respect grew, not just for his position, but for his character. One afternoon, Gerald walked along the golf course, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He thought back to the moment he was first dismissed, the sharp sting of humiliation, the silent anger that had threatened to overwhelm him. Those emotions, he realized, had been necessary catalysts. They had forced him to reflect, to plan, and ultimately to grow. Now, standing amidst the greens and the gentle hum of the club, he felt an inner peace. The lessons of patience, persistence, and quiet strength were evident everywhere, in the laughter of members, in the carefully tended gardens, in the thoughtful design of new programs, and in the subtle yet powerful culture shift that had reached root. That evening, the club held a special gathering to celebrate the renewal of Silver Pines. Gerald addressed the assembled members with humility and warmth. When I first came here, I was dismissed and underestimated. It was painful, yes, but it taught me something invaluable. True strength is quiet, patient, and consistent. Today, this club is not about wealth or status. It is about community, respect, and the shared wisdom we all carry. The members listened in attentive silence, some with tears in their eyes. They realized that Gerald's journey was not just a personal triumph, it was a lesson for everyone present. It was proof that patience, thoughtful action, and perseverance could transform even the most challenging setbacks into enduring success. Later, as Gerald returned to his study, he reflected on the broader impact of his efforts. He knew that true legacy was not measured in titles or material possessions, but in the lives touched, the respect earned, and the quiet influence that shaped others positively. Each member who felt included, valued, and empowered was a testament to the lasting power of deliberate, patient action. The months passed, and Silver Pines continued to thrive. Gerald took quiet pride in observing how the elder programs flourished, how younger members embraced mentorship, and how the overall atmosphere shifted from exclusivity to inclusivity. The once dismissive voices had softened, replaced with acknowledgement, respect, and sometimes admiration. Even in moments of solitude, Gerald found contentment. He walked the gardens at dawn, sipped his tea by the fire at night, and reflected on the journey that had started with rejection and humiliation. The lessons of that journey were etched deeply within him. Setbacks were opportunities, patience was strength, and quiet, deliberate action could yield results far beyond immediate expectations. One night, as the moonlight spilled softly over his study, Gerald wrote in his journal, "Life is not measured by immediate victories or fleeting applause. It is measured by the quiet, thoughtful actions we take, the respect we cultivate, and the lives we touch. Humiliation may spark resolute, but patience and wisdom shape destiny." He closed the journal gently, feeling a serene satisfaction. The journey had been long, filled with challenges, reflections, and careful planning, but it had culminated in something lasting, meaningful, and deeply fulfilling. And as he drifted to sleep that night, Gerald felt a calm joy, not a triumph born of revenge, but a victory crafted through patience, perseverance, and the quiet power of thoughtful action. The Silver Pines Country Club had been transformed, and in the process, Gerald had not only reclaimed his place, but also created a legacy that would inspire respect, dignity, and hope for all generations to come. The early morning light filtered softly through the trees surrounding Silver Pines, casting gentle, elongated shadows across the lawns. Gerald walked slowly along the familiar paths, feeling the dew beneath his shoes and the soft, crisp air filling his lungs. The world seemed quiet, calm, and peaceful, the perfect setting for reflection and serenity. He paused near the small pond at the edge of the club, watching the water ripple gently in response to the wind. Ducks floated gracefully, and the reflections of the trees shimmered softly. Gerald had come here often in the past, but today was different. He felt a sense of completeness, as though every step, every decision, and every challenge he had faced had led him to this tranquil moment. His mind wandered through the journey that had brought him here, from the sharp sting of dismissal to the careful months of planning and preparation, from the subtle victories of quiet investments to the eventual transformation of the club he loved. Each memory was vivid, each lesson etched deeply in his heart. Gerald reflected on the people he had met along the way, the younger members who had learned to respect wisdom, the elder members who had regained their voice and confidence, and even those who had once mocked him, now quietly acknowledging his calm authority. He realized that transformation was not just about reclaiming power, but about creating a space where everyone could feel valued, safe, and respected. The club had become more than a place to play golf or sip tea. It was now a sanctuary for shared experiences, gentle learning, and quiet inspiration. Book clubs, art workshops, nature walks, and storytelling sessions had brought the community together, creating bonds that transcended age and status. Gerald watched quietly as members interacted, their laughter soft but genuine, their conversations filled with warmth and understanding. As the day progressed, Gerald walked through the halls and gardens, observing subtle changes that reflected his vision. The lounge areas were filled with sunlight and soft music, creating spaces where elders could relax and reflect. The gardens bloomed with vibrant colors, each flower carefully tended by members who now understood the value of patience and care. Even the younger members had learned to slow down, to listen, and to appreciate the wisdom and experience around them. One particular afternoon, Gerald sat in the library with a small group of elder members. They were sharing stories, memories, and quiet laughter. Gerald listened more than he spoke, offering gentle guidance and encouragement when appropriate. In these moments, Gerald realized that true influence was not about commanding attention or asserting authority. It was about creating an environment where others could thrive and be heard. The lessons of his journey were clear. Rejection had sparked reflection, reflection had led to preparation, and preparation had brought transformation. Patience had been his greatest ally, and thoughtful action his most powerful tool. Gerald understood now that setbacks were not endpoints, but opportunities to grow, to plan, and to create something enduring and meaningful.
As evening fell, the soft glow of lanterns lit the gardens and pathways. Gerald walked slowly, observing the gentle movements of the club members, the quiet hum of activity, and the serene beauty of the surroundings. There was a calm satisfaction in knowing that the space he had nurtured was now alive with purpose, respect, and connection. Back in his study, Gerald reflected once more on the journey. He poured himself a warm cup of tea and settled into his favorite chair by the fireplace. The flames flickered gently, casting dancing shadows across the room. He opened his journal and wrote slowly, deliberately. Life's challenges are not punishments, but teachers. Every moment of rejection, every instance of doubt, every silent struggle is a step toward wisdom, patience, and fulfillment. True victory is not in proving others wrong, but in quietly transforming circumstances, inspiring respect, and creating lasting impact. He closed the journal gently, placing it beside the tea. The room was calm, the fire warm, and the world outside bathed in soft moonlight. Gerald felt an inner peace that was deep and enduring, a quiet joy that came not from accolades or wealth, but from the knowledge that he had turned humiliation into triumph, rejection into opportunity, and patience into legacy. As he leaned back in his chair, the gentle rhythm of his breath matched the quiet heartbeat of the night. The Silver Pines Country Club had been transformed, and in the process, Gerald had created a sanctuary, not just for himself, but for all who sought comfort, respect, and gentle inspiration. And as sleep began to claim him, Gerald's mind was serene. The journey had been long, the lessons profound, and the triumph quiet yet powerful. Each decision, each act of patience, and each thoughtful step had brought him to this place of calm fulfillment. Outside, the trees whispered softly in the night breeze. The pond reflected the gentle glow of the moon, and inside, Gerald drifted into a peaceful sleep, carrying with him the quiet satisfaction of a life lived thoughtfully, a legacy shaped with care, and a triumph that was as gentle as it was enduring. Tonight, as the world around Silver Pines rested, so too did Gerald, calm, content, and quietly victorious. The journey had been more than a story of power or revenge. It was a testament to the enduring strength of patience, wisdom, and deliberate action. And in that quiet triumph, there was peace, fulfillment, and a gentle promise that every challenge, no matter how painful, could become a path to lasting fulfillment. The dawn arrived gently over Silver Pines, the sky painted in soft hues of pink and gold.
Gerald stepped outside, feeling the fresh morning breeze on his face. The air was crisp and calming, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming flowers from the newly tended gardens. He walked slowly along the familiar paths, each step deliberate, allowing his mind to wander in quiet reflection. He paused near the central fountain, watching the water shimmer in the morning light. Birds chirped softly, their songs blending with the gentle rustle of leaves. It was a peaceful scene, a reminder of how much the club and his own journey had transformed. Gerald allowed himself a moment to simply breathe, to feel the serenity around him, and to appreciate the path that had led to this calm, fulfilling place. The journey had not been simple. Gerald remembered vividly the day he was dismissed, the sharp sting of humiliation, and the slow walk back through the gates that once felt like a sanctuary, but had suddenly become a place of exclusion. That day had been painful, yet it had sparked a determination within him, a quiet fire that fueled months of reflection, planning, and careful action. Through the seasons, Gerald had worked patiently, step by step. He had quietly studied, invested, and strategized, never rushing, never seeking immediate revenge. Every decision had been deliberate, informed by both wisdom and foresight. And when the moment arrived, he had claimed not only his rightful place, but it transformed the club into a community where respect, patience, and shared wisdom were cherished above all. Now, as he walked through the thriving spaces he had nurtured, Gerald observed the subtle beauty of transformation. Elders moved gracefully through the gardens and lounges, engaged in activities that sparked joy and reflection. Young members were learning, listening, and appreciating the value of experience and guidance. The atmosphere had shifted, quietly yet profoundly, from one of status and division to one of inclusivity and calm harmony. In the library, a small circle of members shared stories, laughter soft and heartfelt. Gerald joined briefly, listening more than speaking, offering gentle encouragement. He realized that true leadership was not about commanding attention, but about creating spaces where others felt seen, valued, and inspired. This was the essence of his journey, the quiet power of patience and thoughtful action. As the day unfolded, Gerald reflected on the lessons embedded in his journey. Humiliation had taught resilience, rejection had taught strategy, and deliberate patience had taught enduring strength. Each challenge had been a stepping stone, each setback a chance to grow. The club, now flourishing in both spirit and activity, was a living testament to these truths. Evenings at Silver Pines had taken on a serene rhythm. Lanterns lit the pathways, casting a gentle glow on the gardens and lawns. Soft music drifted through the halls, creating an atmosphere of calm and reflection. Gerald often walked these paths slowly, observing the subtle interactions, the gentle smiles, and the quiet joy that now filled the spaces once dominated by exclusion and arrogance. In his study, Gerald maintained a nightly ritual of reflection. He poured a cup of warm tea, settled into his favorite chair, and wrote in his journal. Each entry was deliberate, capturing insights, gratitude, and the quiet lessons learned from both hardship and success. Tonight, his words were simple, yet profound. True strength is quiet. True influence is patient. Life's lessons are revealed not in moments of triumph alone, but in the steady journey through challenges, reflection, and thoughtful action. Closing the journal, Gerald placed the cup of tea beside him. The fire flickered softly, and the room was bathed in a gentle glow. He leaned back, feeling a deep satisfaction that came not from accolades or recognition, but from the knowledge that patience, wisdom, and deliberate action had created something enduring and meaningful. He thought of the members he had guided, the spaces he had transformed, and the subtle yet profound changes in culture and attitude. Each person who now felt seen, valued, and included was a testament to the quiet power of thoughtful action. Gerald understood that his legacy was not in titles or possessions, but in the lives touched, the respect cultivated, and the lasting atmosphere of kindness, patience, and wisdom. Night deepened, and the world outside Silver Pines settled into calm. Gerald rose slowly, walking to the central window, gazing out at the moonlit gardens. The reflections on the pond shimmered softly, a mirror of the quiet peace he felt within. Every step of the journey had led to this moment, a life transformed, a community uplifted, and a personal sense of fulfillment that was deep and serene. As Gerald finally settled into sleep, the room quiet and warm, he carried with him the lessons of patience, perseverance, and thoughtful action. The Silver Pines Country Club, once a place of exclusion, now thrived as a sanctuary of respect, dignity, and shared wisdom. And within him there was a gentle certainty. Life's setbacks, when met with reflection, planning, and calm determination, could be transformed into the most lasting victories. The gentle night continued, the trees whispering softly in the breeze, the water reflecting the stars, and the world around Silver Pines at peace. Gerald's breathing slowed, deep and steady, as sleep claimed him fully. The journey had been long, the lessons profound, and the triumph quiet yet powerful. A story of resilience, wisdom, and enduring calm. And as he drifted deeper into sleep, the quiet knowledge settled within him that life's true victories are measured not by moments of revenge or fleeting success, but by the gentle, deliberate shaping of one's path, the respect earned, and the legacy left for others to follow. Tonight and every night after, Gerald rested in quiet triumph, a serene smile on his face, carrying the peaceful satisfaction of a life lived thoughtfully and fully.